Once upon a time, there was a wealthy merchant who had an only son named Fearless. This son was afraid of nothing in the world, no matter what it was. When others quivered just from hearing scary stories, Fearless would seek out whatever he heard about. It made no difference to him whether it was noon or midnight. He would wander through deserted castles, churches, cemeteries, crossroads, and any place where people claimed something spooky or haunted appeared. One day, he decided to explore the world. If there's nothing here to truly scare me, no matter how much people talk about it, I'll go until I find out what fear is, he declared. His father, hearing these words, worried endlessly about how he could make his son experience fear at home, so he wouldn't venture out and potentially lose his life. But no matter how hard the father thought, he couldn't come up with a plan. He decided to consult the priest, promising him a hefty sum if he could find a way to scare his son enough to abandon his journey. "Nothing could be easier," said the priest. "Just send him to my church this evening." In the meantime, the priest forged a plan with his bell ringer, and a couple hours later, that evening, the father welcomed Fearless. "What's the matter, father?" Fearless asked. "Well, my bell ringer died unexpectedly, and there's no one to ring the midnight bell. Everyone says the bell ringer will haunt the tower tonight. Everyone is afraid, but I thought he wouldn't be scared." "I'll ring the bell," Fearless replied. The priest thought to himself, "Just you wait, Fearless," as he had prepared a dummy in the bell tower to look like a hanged man. Fearless could hardly wait for midnight. He climbed the dark stairs to the tower, reached the bells, and instead of grabbing a rope, he felt the legs of the dummy. Anyone else might have panicked, but Fearless, thinking it was the dead bell ringer, grabbed the dummy's legs. "Wait a minute," he said. "I'll teach you not to mess around after death." He pulled and rang the bell with all his might, but the dummy broke away, its head rolling one way and its body falling the other. "Well now, if you could climb the tower, you can climb down," Fearless said, and left it there. The priest was waiting for him below. "So what happened up there? Are you all right?" "Nothing happened," Fearless replied. "What could happen to me? But that bell ringer, whether he is dead or alive, he had a rough time. Imagine he was hanging in the tower. What was I supposed to do with him? I rang the bell by his legs, as you heard. But poor thing, he couldn't take it. His head came off." "Oh dear, this is bad," the priest exclaimed. "What now?" "We placed the bell ringer in his coffin in the small church with candles lit around him. But is he going to stay in the tower or return to his place? And I need to go snuff out the candles around him." "That's the least of it," Fearless said. "I'll snuff them out for you. I'll see for myself what's going on with the dead." The priest just wanted Fearless to go alone to the bell ringer. As they had agreed, the bell ringer pretended to be dead, wrapped in white sheets, ready to scare Fearless. When Fearless snuffed out the candles, the bell ringer slowly rose from the coffin and began speaking in a grave voice, as if from beyond the grave. "Why do you disturb me? Stop! You will die here. Lie down in my place. I will wander the world instead of you." Fearless approached him and said calmly, "What's wrong with you? Aren't you dead? Lie down and be at peace. I have nothing to do with the dead." But the figure in the coffin continued to raise its arms and legs and finally tried to embrace him. This angered Fearless. "What the heck?" he said. "It seems you haven't properly said goodbye to this world. Wait, I'll send you off to the next one." He broke a leg of a stool and struck the bell ringer on the head. Blood splurted from his nose and mouth, and he collapsed back into the coffin. The next morning there was chaos at the rectory, and the merchant's house, fearing what kind of trouble they would face now that the bell ringer couldn't be revived. They consulted here and there, but every situation has no end. To get Fearless out of sight until the incident was forgotten, they sent him off to the world. His father gave him weapons, a horse, and money for the journey. His mother prepared a hearty farewell meal and packed his bag with as many provisions as it could hold. Fearless was happy and set off immediately, boldly heading into the wild world. He traveled through mountains, meadows, plains, and hills. After the provisions from the bag thinned to nothing, he ate whatever he found along the way, whether it was a berry here or a root there. Slowly, he began to lose his strength. Exhausted and hungry, he finally arrived at a large and beautiful castle. But this castle had no door. How to get inside? He wandered around from all sides, but there was no entrance. He would have spent the night shivering on the bare ground if the gate hadn't appeared by itself in the evening. He entered, and there, in one hall, was a table covered with a cloth, bread, salt, and a glass of wine on it with a note on the glass, the refreshment for the traveler. He sat down, took a sip, and food appeared on the table as if by magic. After dinner, he only thought about finally getting a good night's sleep. In a side room, he found a nicely prepared bed. He lay down and slept like a log. At midnight, a loud crash echoing throughout the castle woke him up. Suddenly, the doors flew open, and in rushed 12 spirits with clubs. They pounced on him. "Are you the one who fears nothing? Wait, we'll scare you. How dare you barge into our castle like a thief? You won't escape now." They didn't let him speak and pulled him among themselves, beating him from head to toe as if he were a bundle of straw. They would have broken all his bones, but just then, the clock struck 1, and the spirits vanished. Fearless lay there on the floor, seeing black before his eyes. Barely, he crawled to the bed and, luckily, found a strange ointment there. He applied it to his wounds and felt immediately better and slept like a baby until the white dawn. In the morning, as soon as he jumped up and got ready, there was food on the table for his refreshment. He ate his fill. "But wait, you wretches, I'll deal with you. Last night you didn't even let me say a word, just beat me. Well, we'll talk now." But no matter how much he searched, there wasn't a living soul in the entire castle. What to do? He wandered through the castle again, inspecting every corner. Finally, he found a small door in one wall. When he opened it and barely crawled through, there was a beautiful garden. In the middle of the garden was the clearest pond he's ever seen, and in the pond, a lovely maiden. "What are you doing here, fair maiden?" Fearless asked. "Why don't you come out?" "I would love to, but I can't. I'm cursed here." "And who cursed you?" "I used to live here peacefully with my father and mother, but one day 12 spirits attacked us. They couldn't harm my father and mother because they had royal anointing, so they banished them far away across the sea. But I've been suffering here for 12 years. I can't go under the water nor above it. And we wouldn't be able to talk if you hadn't already suffered for me. And if you hold out well for 2 more nights, you'll free me completely. But the spirits will come to tempt and persuade you to say just 1 word, and if you speak, you'll die. Then they'll haunt and torture you even worse to make you afraid. If you neither speak nor get scared, you'll see the miracle that will happen here." "There's nothing to fear. God will help me," Fearless said, comforting the lady so she wouldn't worry about him, and just waited. The next evening, everything was the same as before. A tasty dinner on the table, and Fearless ate and drank his fill. After dinner, he lay down but couldn't sleep. He fidgeted as if ants were building a nest on his back, knowing the hour was approaching. The spirits rushed in again, but this time they circled around him, speaking kindly, asking questions, trying to charm him, just to get a word out of him. But he remained silent. Enraged, they surrounded him and began beating him with their clubs. He didn't groan or flinch, just endured. When the hour struck 1, the spirits vanished. In great pain, he crawled to the bed, but as soon as he applied the ointment, he healed and slept like a baby. In the morning, when he went to the garden, the maiden was freed up to her waist and more beautiful than before. They spent the whole day talking. On the 3rd evening, the dinner was again on the table, and Fearless ate and drank, but it didn't taste as good as before. He pondered what might happen the 3rd time. He couldn't sleep. His throat tightened a bit when the midnight was to come. Was this the taste of fear everyone kept telling him about? The midnight struck, and the spirits surrounded him, and the largest one stood with a big iron spit right next to the bed. But at first, they greeted him kindly, trying to coax a word out of him. Finally they shouted, "You'll scream when you're roasting!" They immediately stretched him on the spit and roasted him alive over the fire. When he was about to give in, they pulled him off and roared, "If that wasn't enough, now we'll finish you by tearing pieces of you." But just then, the hour struck 1 and the spirits vanished. It was hardest for him to reach the ointment. But once he applied it, he felt better and slept like a baby. He slept a long time after such an ordeal. In the morning, he opened his eyes, and the servants walked around on tiptoes, so as not to wake him, ready to assist if he woke up. When he got up, they brought him clothes. As he dressed, the lady, also beautifully dressed, welcomed him in the chamber. She thanked him for freeing her and gave him a beautiful white handkerchief with her name embroidered on it. "This," she said, "is your token that I'm yours. But it would be all for naught if you didn't take me to my father. So if you love me, come. We'll have our wedding there." She wouldn't relent until he promised, though he had his doubts. In a couple days, they prepared for the journey and cheerfully rode on their horses. One night, they stopped at an inn among the mountains. The innkeeper was an old witch who had a daughter she immediately wanted to marry off to Fearless. But how to manage it? For the witch, it was an easy task. She took a cursed needle, pricked his coat, and Fearless fell to the ground as if he was dead. In the morning, his princess nearly lost her mind from great sorrow. But there was nothing to be done. She buried him, mourned for him, but then continued on her way to her parents without him. As soon as the young bride left the inn, the old witch dug Fearless up, removed the needle from his coat, and he opened his eyes. He couldn't stand the sight of the witch's daughter, so he just wandered around, always looking and searching for his beloved. But it was all in vain. The witch had cast a spell on him, preventing him from leaving the vicinity of the inn. No matter how far he wandered, he always ended up back there. One day, in those mountains, he met a wise woman. She looked much like the witch, but this one meant him well. "Oh, Fearless," she said, "if only you knew what had happened to you." She told him everything about his situation, but for the wise woman it was easy to help him. "Take this," she said, handing him an herb. "Place it into your left boot and go straight back to the inn. Your hostess will turn into a cat and will try to jump at you. Just kick her with your left foot and she will burst into tar. Then gather your things and come back to me. Don't worry about anything else." Even though he was still far from the inn, a large black cat ran out at him, trying to claw his eyes out. Les kicked it once, and it burst into tar. He took his belongings and returned to the wise woman. "Well, Granny, give me some more advice. Here I am." "I'll give you an advice. I'll give you one indeed," the old woman said. "Don't look back and take this middle path. You'll come to a high and steep mountain, which you can only climb through a path of steps in there. At the top, you'll find a garden where every flower is pressed down to the ground by a human bone. Gather all those bones and bury them. If you don't, know that you will too end up pressing down other flowers with your own bones. But if you give those bones a proper burial, A creature you saw before at the cursed castle will come to you, but it won't harm you. It will even praise you and ask what you desire as a reward. Ask for nothing else but for it to tell you where your bride is now. That creature can tell you because it is the king of all four-legged animals. He didn't need to be told twice. He thanked her and continued until he reached the mountain and the garden. He gathered and buried the bones, and the wilted flowers immediately revived. Before him stood the creature, as if it had sprung from the ground, praised him for his deed, and finally asked what he wished for as a reward. "I want nothing else," said Fearless. "Just tell me where my lost bride is." "Brother, I don't know. But wait, I'll call my subjects from all over the world. They will tell you if they've seen her anywhere." The creature blew a horn, and the earth shook. All the animals from around the world gathered, and the creature asked each one, from the smallest to the largest, if they had seen such a bride. But none of them had. "No matter," said the creature. "What my subjects don't know, the birds might. Go to the next garden. There you'll find my brother, the king of birds." Fearless went to the next garden. There, too, the creature greeted him. "What are you seeking here?" "What else could I seek but to find where my bride is?" Fearless answered. "It will be done," said the king of birds, "because I too appreciate what you did in my brother's garden. Since then, my flowers have been blooming beautifully too. Just wait a moment." The king of birds blew a horn, and the earth trembled. It sounded like mountains were breaking as all the birds in the world flocked there. "Have any of you seen such a bride?" the king asked from the smallest to the largest. But they all replied that they hadn't seen her. It seemed there would be no news from the entire bird kingdom, but just then, the forest rustled, and an old eagle circled above the garden and landed. "Why are you so late when I blow the horn?" the king scolded him. "Didn't you hear?" "Oh, I heard, my lord. But I was carrying the bride of the Black Sea King across the Black Sea." "That's her!" exclaimed Fearless, delighted to hear some good news. "Is she well?" he asked. "How could she not be?" said the eagle, "when she's preparing for her wedding right now." "With whom?" Fearless asked. "Well, with some young man." "Can we get to the wedding in time?" Fearless asked. "We might, or we might not," said the eagle. "I am old and not sure if I have enough strength. We might fall into the sea." "Oh, my dear eagle, please try your strength one more time. Whatever happens, happens." "All right, let's try." "It will be as God wills," said Fearless, and he was already sitting on the eagle. They flew safely across the sea and landed near the city where the princess's father lived. Fearless began to thank the eagle for his efforts, persistently asking what he owed him. "A good deed for a good deed," said the eagle finally. "Now draw your sword and cut off my head." "But to you, my dear eagle, never." "Draw your sword," thundered the eagle, "or you will never reunite with your bride. As soon as my head falls off, rip my heart out. It will help you whenever you are in the need of coin. Now draw your sword. Let me rest at last. I've served the world long enough." Reluctantly, Fearless cut off the eagle's head and tore out its heart. He ran to the city and visited the first inn. But the innkeeper just shook his head at him, puzzled by his behavior. "And what's the matter, my dear innkeeper?" asked Fearless. "Well, my lord," said the innkeeper, "only the blind wouldn't see and the deaf wouldn't hear. There is a proclamation posted on every gate, and you can hear the trumpets now, that our princess is having a wedding. Everyone is invited to eat and drink their fill, and they'll receive a ducat for every hour." "Well, that's something," said Fearless. "But if it's like that at the king's palace, here with us it must be even more." The innkeeper stared, wondering if this man was right in his mind. But when Fearless started pouring out ducats and coins until the floor was covered, the innkeeper's perspective changed immediately. "And now," said Fearless, "buy me a golden coach, horses, and hire me a staff. I am going to have a wedding too." Everyone from the palace ran to the inn. Even the bride herself came to see the man who had stolen her special day. She arrived when the festivities were in full swing. She barely had the time to look around before a young man whisked her into a dance. His large head obscured his face. In the middle of the dance, the young man dropped the handkerchief she had given him at the enchanted castle. She recognized it immediately, picked it up, and exclaimed, "The man I swore to unwillingly shall not be my husband, but the one who lost this handkerchief." Fearless turned to the princess and removed his head. She recognized him at once and embraced him in front of everyone. Finally, the wedding took place. This time, the promised one, and they lived happily ever after. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And also, maybe watch another, because that's how the algorithm works. Have a great day and thank you for stopping by.